Hey everybody, welcome back to Meta Perspective, where we go meta on themes like insight, awakening, and reality. And today we are talking about, going meta on Dharma, right? And that's, going meta on Dharma in the 21st century. And, the reason I'm making this video and bringing some of this stuff up is because it's a lot of it has been my own experience, is that it's different nowadays than it has been in the last few hundred and thousand years regarding Dharma, meditation, practice, enlightenment, and the path to enlightenment. We're in a day and age with the metaverse, for lack of a better term, where, not only are there these kind of tunnel realities within our own subjective perception, but there's several tunnel realities out in the social world now with social networking and the different groups and cliques that were always there, but now it's just on a magnified scale, right? So that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, not only that we have this kind of like physical reality we're all exploring and experiencing, but now there's this kind of digital reality in a regard. So that's one more thing, and another thing I would add on top of that now is that with the internet and Dharma, research and practice. I want to say research now because you can be a Dharma researcher more so without being a practitioner, just because you can go on the internet and have access to all these books from all these different traditions and teachers and masters and what have you, gurus, whatever you want to call it. Whereas like a few hundred years ago, like you really had to just go to the teacher to learn the teaching, get the transmission, and practice that. We're coming up to the 20th century where you can read these different books and kind of include what works for you and have more of a meta view than previously. Right, so you can just go to a Zendo or a Zen temple and you can practice Zen, but you were still able to read books on yoga and stuff, where a few thousand years ago that was less accessible, even a few hundred years before that. And now we're in a day and age in the 21st century where you can literally access anything, right? And that has pros and cons. It can be very helpful and it can also be very problematic for individuals. Can depending on your temperament, your approach, your experience, because again, now you can literally access anything. So not only can you just go to a Zendo and then go to like an ashram or go to some kind of yoga studio or facility or go to a Vipassana retreat just as readily as you can do anything else, as readily as you can go to, Carvel or McDonald's or, the supermarket. So you can kind of, have a buffet of Dharma, so to speak. Which again, there's pros and cons to that, because there are, very helpful ways where you can correlate and compare different teachings. And that can be very helpful. I can see that the problem is if you're kind of running through an endless loop of New Age philosophy and you're just what my friend Frank Yang would say, mentally masturbating, in a sense, where you're just playing with these ideas and you're not getting down to the actual practice is one thing. And another thing is you can more easily mix practices that don't necessarily complement each other, or have a spiritual flavor of the week. So these are all things, and some of these things I've I don't want to say struggled with, but I've encountered and had to take the reins in on myself and say, wait, just focus on this and do this now and stay on track. Because again, if you're doing certain practices and reading different philosophies, it might not be optimal for your own practice. So And again, and there's really some great benefits to it, in my opinion, where you can see somebody like Daniel Ingram's book, and he admits to more of a perennial approach, and in that book there's a ton of stuff, but again, in my opinion, he puts it together in a way that works, right? And that's not always the case. So that's something to keep in mind. In my opinion, I think it's really helpful if you find a practice and you stick with it at least for a period of time, right? So let's say you're gonna look at Kriya Yoga, right? You're learning from a Kriya Yoga teacher. You're doing all the Kriya Yoga practices. You're studying the philosophy that goes with those practices, and before you move on to anything else, you should, if you ever do, maybe you won't, which is fine. It's really actually great to just have a staple and a center core right there and just stick with it. I mean, a lot of the greatest teachers have done that. On the other hand, there's other teachers that have kind of had a variety of different teachers over the years from different traditions, like say Shinzen Young, who has done incredible work, is I think one of the most incredible modern day Dharma teachers as far as the way he brings things into perspectives and is able to integrate those with I guess you can say his teachings in general, but also unified mindfulness and other things like that. But again, if you are going to kind of go that route and look at some of the different teachings and practices and see if any of them complement your own path and practice, it's good at least, say you have done the yoga for several years and you want to really take a deeper look into Zen or something else, or Vipassana. It's really good at that point, before you do that you have kind of have a very strong understanding of practice and what your previous practice was maybe, and then when you come to this one, before you just jump off to say I'm only going to do Vipassana for 2 weeks and then jump into Zen for 2 weeks. I think it's better if you say, okay, like for the next 6 months I'm doing nothing but Vipassana, or I'm doing nothing but Zen, and that means practicing that practice. That means studying that philosophy, learning about those teachers, and really in a sense throwing yourself in there. I think you're going to greatly benefit yourself in that way, especially moving forward, say a year or two down the road, when you want to go meta and kind of look at things from that perspective, from the bigger picture perspective, and you have a much clearer view of how those things complement each other and what's useful and what's not in your own regard. But again, you could just go on the internet and you can take an 8-week course in mindfulness-based stress reduction, and then the next week, the next 6 weeks, you can do another course in this thing, and you can end up really going in circles in a way. Not that you're not going to learn a lot, and it could be very helpful to your practice, but I think in many regards it's going to be very helpful for you if you stick to something for quite a while, at least a few months, and see what that practice does for you before you move on to something else. And again, I think once you have something down, it's kind of like riding a bike, where or driving, if you're an automobile driver, once you have it down, it's just like working out, bench pressing, squatting, deadlifting, anything like that, you're going to have a muscle memory kind of thing. So there's things that will, from that point on, always kind of stick with you, and you'll always have those insights and realizations that you garnered from here. and if you happen to move on to another practice or philosophy that you're currently studying, I think you're going to be much more grounded in that. So those are just some things to consider. I'm really interested in hearing everybody here in the comments as far as how some of their practices have been, if they've kind of been on the same path where they've looked at different philosophies and approaches and stuck with one for a year or two, 5, 10 years, and then started learning about other practices. Because you could still say you did one practice for 5 or 10 years, you can still continue that while you're learning new things. But again, you're probably always going to have to come back to that one thing, or fully invest your time and energy into something rather than just jumping all around and really not going anywhere, in a sense where you're at some point you're going to be running in circles and you're going to be scatterbrained in a sense. And all these different questions are going to arise faster than you have insights to kind of reconcile them. So rather than going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper in your practice, you're kind of having these waves of many arisings and passings because you're going all over the place. Anyways, that's just some of my own thinking on Dharma in the 21st century and going meta on Dharma in the 21st century. And I think it was important to make this video because this is the world we're in nowadays, and it's only going to get greater and greater and greater to the extent where pretty soon in the metaverse you're going to have a hologram of a teacher in front of you or something, or you're going to go into like a thing where it's like a video game and sit zazen in a damn virtual game. I mean, that's where we're headed, right? And I know people are going to be old school and say, "Nah, I'd never do that," and I 100% get that, because there is like social meditation nowadays, and I know Vince Horn has done stuff like that, and I appreciate that's a very good way to get people involved. But for me, I really like to do my practice old school, because that's the way I've always done it, and it's kind of like, I don't know, that's just the way I prefer it. So again, I appreciate people watching this. If you have comments or suggestions or want to share your story in the comments, I'm interested in hearing that and some of the practices you've tried, and some of your experiences in learning the different things, and kind of on this meta view of Dharma and meditation practice and awakening, if you want to call it that. So again, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Stay meta.